The ceremony hall fell silent the moment she stepped inside. Every eye turned toward the woman in the plain, perfectly pressed uniform, its left breast gleaming with ribbons and medals that caught the light like fragments of forgotten history. But behind the shimmer was a storm. The murmurs began softly, a whisper rippling through the crowd like poison carried by the wind. Those can't be real. No one's heard of her. Who let her in here? Those medals, she must have bought them. Her name was Captain Lila Morgan, and though her posture stood proud, her eyes carried the weight of wars no one else had seen. She walked with the quiet discipline of someone who had faced death so often it no longer frightened her. But today, it wasn't bullets she faced. It was disbelief, jealousy, and the cruelty of those who had never known her story. The Defense Awards banquet was supposed to be an evening of honor, a celebration of courage and service. Yet, as Lila took her assigned seat near the back, she could feel the eyes of her peers burning into her back. A few men snickered as she sat down, one even shaking his head with a smirk. "Stolen valor," someone muttered just loud enough for her to hear. She ignored them. She always did. She had learned long ago that truth didn't need defending. It only needed time. Still, as the speeches began and the hall filled with polite applause, a lump settled in her throat. Every medal pinned to her chest represented a chapter written in blood, not hers alone, but those of the soldiers who hadn't come home. Each ribbon was a promise kept to the fallen, a vow that their sacrifice would not be forgotten. But promises, it seemed, meant little in a room full of skeptics. When the master of ceremonies approached the podium to begin the formal introductions, the air grew tense. "Before we continue," he announced, "a concern has been raised regarding one of tonight's attendees." He paused, flipping through a clipboard as the crowd leaned forward, sensing drama. "Captain Lila Morgan, your record and decorations have come under question." The words dropped like a bomb. A wave of whispers erupted instantly. Lila's hands tightened into fists on her lap. She rose slowly, her boots echoing sharply against the marble floor as she faced the front of the hall. "I have nothing to hide," she said softly, though her voice carried through the silence. "Every medal on this uniform was earned in service to this country." The MC hesitated. "That may be so, Captain, but certain, records of your missions appear classified. There's no accessible documentation to verify the operations you claim to have served in." A colonel near the front leaned toward another officer. "Classified, huh? How convenient," he muttered, drawing a few quiet chuckles. Lila felt her heart hammer against her ribs. She had known this day might come, the day when the things she couldn't say would be used against her. Her missions were buried in shadows. Rescue operations behind enemy lines, covert extractions, unsanctioned deployments where names were never written down. She had lost more comrades than she could count. And now those silent victories had turned into invisible lies in the eyes of her peers. Someone in the back yelled, "If it's classified, then maybe it never happened." The crowd erupted again, murmurs, laughter, judgment. The weight of every whispered accusation pressed down on her shoulders until it was almost unbearable. She stood motionless, breathing through the pain, forcing herself not to react. The master of ceremonies looked uncomfortable. "Captain, perhaps if you could provide some form of verification." "I can't," she said simply. "The missions I served on were never meant to be public. But I assure you the blood on my boots was real." Her voice broke just slightly on that last word, and for a fleeting moment, the hall went quiet again. But the damage was done. The whispers resumed, softer now, crueler somehow for their quietness. By the time the event neared its end, she sat alone at her table, untouched meal before her, her heart heavy but her posture unbroken. She didn't need their validation. She knew what she had done, who she had saved, who she had lost. But it still hurt, because the very people she had fought to protect were now the ones calling her a fraud. Then the doors opened. Every head turned as two Secret Service agents stepped in, scanning the room. The hall went silent once more, but this time not from contempt, from shock. Behind them walked the President of the United States. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. The band's soft music faded to nothing. Cameras froze in stunned hands. The President, dressed in a dark suit with the American flag pinned over his heart, walked straight through the hall, past generals, past admirals, past the rows of decorated officers. His steps echoed with purpose until he stopped directly in front of Captain Lila Morgan. He didn't look at the MC. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked only at her. The room held its breath as he reached out, offering his hand. "Captain Morgan," he said quietly, his voice carrying a gravity that silenced even the skeptics. "It's been a long time." Her eyes widened in disbelief. "Sir, you remember?" "I don't forget those who saved my life," the president said. The hall gasped. Every camera lifted at once. Every whisper stopped. The president turned to the crowd, his tone shifting, firm and deliberate. "You question her medals? You question her service? Let me tell you what she can't. I was a senator visiting an Allied base overseas when an insurgent strike hit without warning. She was off duty. She wasn't even supposed to be there. But she ran into the chaos anyway. Pulled me and 6 others from a burning convoy. She refused evacuation until every wounded soldier was out." His voice cracked slightly as he continued. "When we finally lifted off, she stayed behind. Said her place was with the ones still fighting. I thought she was dead for months, and when I became president, I ordered her name cleared from the classified list so she could receive what she earned. Every medal you see on that uniform is real. Every one of them paid for with courage that most of us can only hope to understand." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the air seemed to still. The men who had mocked her earlier now stared at their plates ashamed. The MC lowered his head. Some of the younger officers had tears in their eyes. Lila felt her throat tighten. She hadn't expected this, not vindication, not gratitude. She had served because it was the right thing to do, not for recognition. But hearing the truth spoken aloud after years of silence broke something inside her. A dam holding back years of pain, loss, and unspoken memories. The president turned back to her and saluted. "Thank you for your service, Reaper." Her call sign, the one she had buried long ago. The one no one was supposed to know. The crowd rose in a wave, a standing ovation thundering through the hall as she stood there, eyes wet, trying to hold her composure. The sound washed over her like a storm of redemption, loud, unstoppable, real. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to smile, not the practiced military smile of restraint, but the fragile human one of someone finally seen. That night, when she left the hall, the air felt lighter, the stars brighter. The pain didn't disappear, but it finally had meaning again. She didn't need to prove anything anymore. The truth had walked in with the highest authority in the land and spoken for her, and in doing so, it gave voice to every forgotten soldier who had ever been doubted, dismissed, or disbelieved. She paused at the steps outside, looking back at the lights of the hall one last time. Somewhere inside, people were still talking, this time not about whether her medals were real, but about the courage it took to earn them. And she whispered softly into the night, "For all of them who never came home." If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe, and not for me, but for every silent hero who gave everything without asking for recognition. Your support keeps their stories alive. Special request to comment below with a single word, respect, if you believe real heroes don't need to prove themselves. Let the world see how many still remember the value of quiet courage.